Welcome to Mayor Cavalier Johnson's public hearing on the 2024 City of Milwaukee requested budget. Mayor Johnson and Budget Director Nik Kovac will be giving a brief presentation summarizing the 2024 departmental budget requests and related budget items. Would like to mention we have a number of individuals attending from this employees of the City of Milwaukee, and we did see that Alderman Brostoff registered to attend as well. Before the presentation begins, I'd like to provide some basic directions on audience participation. After the presentation, there will be a question and comment period. You can participate in two different ways. You can type your questions and comments by using the icon labeled with the letters Q&A, or you may choose to speak by pressing the hand icon to raise your hand. Staff from the budget and management team will be compiling your written questions and comments and reading them aloud to the extent that we can. If you have your hand raised, you will be called on and your microphone will be unmuted. Remember to then unmute your own microphone by pressing the microphone icon. Please then provide your name and address. You will be given 2 minutes to speak, and you will be notified when you have 30 seconds remaining. This will hopefully allow us to hear from everyone in attendance this evening. There are Spanish translation services available during the question and comment period. We want to pull up the presentation. And if we go to the first slide, or the second slide, I guess. Yeah. So as the slide indicates, there are 3 presentation goals this evening. 1, provide a general background on Milwaukee's finances, both pre and post Act 12. 2, provide information about the City of Milwaukee's budget structure and budget process. And 3, summarize the 2024 departmental budget requests. Without further ado, Mayor Johnson will start tonight's presentation.
All right, well, thank you so much, Amanda, and good evening, everybody. Thank you for taking the time out of your evening to join us for this preliminary budget hearing. First, I'd like to thank Budget Director Nik Kovac, his team, as well as my staff for all their hard work on the budget. It's no small endeavor, as many of you know. The needs are great. The dollars are limited. I want to thank alders who have at least registered to join us here tonight. I believe Alderman Coggs has, and so has Alderman Jonathan Brostoff. So thank you both. So if you go on to the next slide, here we are. Just as some background information for those who may not be aware, the City of Milwaukee runs on an annual budget from January 1 to December 31. The city is required by law, by state law, to have a balanced budget. The City of Milwaukee was founded in 1846, and for a time, the City of Milwaukee's City Hall, the building where I'm in right now, was once upon a time the tallest habitable building in the world. If you go to the next slide for me, we'll talk about shared revenue since the year 2000. So let's talk about that. What is shared revenue? What shared revenue is the portion of the amount of money that the state collects from sales taxes as well as income taxes that is then supposed to be distributed to local governments all over the state, including right here in the City of Milwaukee. It had until about 2009 been the largest single source of revenue that we received here in the city. But sometime near around the year 2000, the formula for distributing shared revenue was frozen. So as costs for providing services continue to rise, as they do each year, our main revenue stream was flat. In fact, the City of Milwaukee received less in shared revenue in 2023 than it did in the year 2000. And that's not inflation-adjusted terms. That's in real, actual dollars. So if shared revenue from the state had kept pace with inflation, the City of Milwaukee would have received $416 million in 2023 instead of the $229 million that we did receive. So you can imagine how a large difference like that would have made in the financial outlook for the City of Milwaukee. If you go on to the next slide for me, you'll see a chart that I think that many of you probably have seen before. talking about the relation of shared revenue or state aids to property taxes here in the city. So as I mentioned before, shared revenue used to be our largest single source of revenue. The chart that's before you, it clearly demonstrates how we've been forced to rely more heavily on the property tax in order to keep up with rising costs of providing services that residents in Milwaukee need. You can see the orange bar that's on the graph there. That's the state shared revenue bar. It had been flat and even declined in some of the years shown in the period here. The blue bar that you see on the chart is our property tax levy, and that's now by far the largest single source of revenue that we have here in the city. If you go on to the next slide, we'll discuss some of the methods the city has been working on to address the financial imbalance that we've had. So we've been proactive on the expenditure side, looking for ways to reduce costs without cutting back on some of the core services that people in the city depend on. A great deal of those cost reductions have impacted our hardworking city employees. So wages, benefit packages, they remain competitive, but we've had to trim back in some areas and ask employees to pay more into the retirement systems as well as to the healthcare benefits that they receive. We've also improved employee safety programs, which has netted the city $5 million in savings from reduced workers' compensation payments. So that's good news for safety for employees who deliver services to people all across the city. Go on to the next slide. So this slide, it shows the main reason for what we've been calling the looming fiscal cliff. It shows the increases in the city's required pension payments. So you'll notice way on the left side of the chart, you'll see from 1996 through 2009, there was no, and I mean zero pension payment at all. Starting in 2010, though, for a number of reasons, including fallout from the global financial crisis, you all remember that very well, the city was now required to make pension payments. And these payments, they were burdensome, but they were relatively consistent until we got to present times, 2023, 2024. When we were building the budget for this year, 2023, we still were not aware of what the required payment for 2023 would be. So we budgeted for a $100 million payment, which is still a substantial increase from the previous year. But we ultimately came to learn that the real amount was closer to $133 million. So we're going to make the underpayment from 2023 whole by adding it to our 2024 payment. This amount is represented by the slice of orange you see in the bar representing year 2024. The gray slice of the bars that starts in 2024 and thereafter represent increased pension payments that result from Act 12. Now, I know what many of you may be thinking, right? The whole Act 12 conversation, increased payments. I thought Act 12, helped the situation. Well, so we'll get into that and just how the revenue and pension aspects of Act 12 give us tools we need to meet our upcoming fiscal challenges that we have. So on this slide here, with the approval of Act 12, the state agrees to increase our portion of state share revenue by 10%. While still not sufficient or fair, they agree to pay a 3% increase annually. However, this revenue increase came with some strings attached, including that we maintain public safety strength at a set level. In fact, if we reduce public safety workforce, we'll be significantly penalized in state shared revenue. Act 12 also allows the city to enact a 2% local option sales tax if business and tourism continues to boom here in Milwaukee, which we hope that it will and think that it will. We'll see revenues growing upwards towards $190 million. But of course, these are all just estimates. The state does not generally have sales taxes broken down by the city level. They're usually tabulated by the county level. So again, they're just estimates. So we'll be cautious and need to make prudent decisions. Act 12 requires us to reduce the pension discount rate or the projected future return on investment from 7.5% down to 6.8%. So this change will result in a huge unfunded liability hole that will have to be filled. And the slide shows our short-term pension costs have spiked by another $45 million. So again, so if you go to the next slide for me, what the sales tax changes. It gives the city revenue options for the first time in over a generation. It prevents drastic cuts in service. It stabilizes our pension costs and does that long term. For the first time ever in the history of the city, tourists and commuters, people who come into the city for work or play each day from outside, will help to pay for services that they receive, and it'll provide some immediate relief from the looming fiscal cliff we've been facing for the past several decades. But we still got a long and rocky road ahead of us that we'll have to work prudently in order to navigate. So some key considerations for the 2024 budget. For the first time in decades, cost to continue budgets are likely in all departments. Increasing police and fire sworn personnel to ensure compliance with Wisconsin Act 12 will be increasing Office of Equity Inclusion and OA, Office of African American Affairs budgets to reflect my priorities as mayor, as well as priorities from members of the Common Council. We'll be reversing decades-long depletions in reserves and deferring needed capital improvements. We'll be budgeting for more competitive wages in critical positions, catching up on the full pension payment for 2023, and budgeting for increased pension costs resulting from Act 12 that lowered our discount. That's my part of the presentation. Hope that you all were able to take that information. And now we'll ask Budget Director Nik Kovac to present his part of the presentation.
Thank you, Mayor, for that presentation. Thank you, all of you, for attending, and especially to my staff, Amanda Cervantes, and Brian Reinders and Andrea Fowler. The Deputy Budget Director Brian Reinders and ARPA Director Andrea Fowler are on the call as well as presenters. The mayor went through the big picture of the history, and I'd now like to go through a little more detail to give you a sense of the budget process and the details of the requests that came in this May. So on May 9th of 2024, the departmental budget requests were due. That's actually a state mandated deadline. And then the mayor and his team and the budget office, we have from May through September, which is already tomorrow, to develop an executive budget based on those requests. Today, August 31st, is the mayor's public budget hearing to describe those requests. September 19th, so less than about 3 weeks away, the mayor will be submitting his proposed budget. And then the Common Council's Finance and Personnel Committee will review that budget from late September all the way through October. And then they'll begin amending the budget in late October and early November if they see fit. On October 2nd, there will be a joint public hearing on the budget where you'll have a chance to react to the mayor's proposed budget. The proposed budget is not being unveiled tonight. It will be unveiled in a few weeks, and then you'll have a chance on October 2nd to give public comment to the mayor and all the council members on what you think of the proposed budget. And then on November 3rd is when the budget will be adopted by the council. So that gives you a sense of the timeline and where we are within that timeline. Now to give you a general sense of where our money comes from, this will be the first two slides are off 23 adopted budgets. The slides after that will all be the 24 requests. So when you look at our general fund revenues, there are three main sources of revenue. Charges for service, that's everybody's favorite. Those are the fees, your user fees, sanitation, snow and ice, street light fee, etc. Those have increased also in recent years, partly because shared revenue has been frozen. And as the mayor showed, shared revenue used to be our largest source of revenue, no longer is. So that chart shows you that the property taxes are now significantly more than shared revenue in the 23 budget. That trend is going to reverse a bit in 24, but we didn't know that when the requests came in. So where does the money go? These are the departmental operating budget allocations. Probably many of you have seen this pie chart before. You can see police is our largest single department in terms of expenses, and public works and fire come in as second and third. So together, public safety is about 60% of our annual operating budget. And every year those costs go up. And so if we don't have increased revenue, we would have to cut services, which is what we had been doing for a couple of decades due to those trends. This is really the first year ever we've gotten enough revenue from the new sales tax and the increases in shared revenue where we can actually seriously consider a cost to continue budget. So when you look at the overall budget structure, before I had just shown you the annual operating portion of the budget, and now this shows you that the overall budget came in at $1.91 billion of requests for 24, which would be an increase over it was 1.7 billion was the adopted budget. As we split that up, we talk about the property tax supplemented funds. So that's the general city purpose funds that I had shown you earlier. But there's also the employee retirement costs, the pension costs, the capital improvements budget, and the city debt budget, the money we have to pay for prior capital improvements that we borrowed for, as well as our delinquent tax fund and our contingent fund, which is usually $5 million every year. So that makes up $1.5 billion dollars of the budget. There are also special revenue funds, which are part of the city budget but operate relatively independently within that budget. Now, the big ones are the waterworks, the sewer maintenance fund, and the transportation fund. So you pay a water bill, you pay a sewer bill and a stormwater fee, and you pay either pay your meter for parking or pay a parking ticket if you don't, and that supports, or pay in a city-owned parking structure that supports the transportation fund. This is also where we put the grant and aid budget, which can fluctuate year to year depending on grant cycles, and the county delinquent tax fund. So when you look just within the property tax supplemented funds, this slide, especially the first line here, requires a little explanation, which I'll do now. You can see that the departmental expenses went up, or it looks like they went up by 96.1 million. But keep in mind that in 23, we had significant federal funding that we used to plug operating holes, the American Rescue Plan Act funding. We spent about $84 million supplementing. In 23, we put that money mostly in the fire department, and the council added some money more to the fire and into the library budget. So when you see that increase of $96 million, it doesn't factor in that we still have ARPA left to spend in 24. So if you factored in the ARPA, you wouldn't see as much of an increase in the department. You will see, and you also do see an increase of about 11% in our overall capital costs and city debt costs per the requests. And we expected the pension cost to go up anyway because of the 5-year cycle that the mayor had showed you, but then they're going to go up. These are the requests. They went up even more because of Act 12. But this shows you what the requests were in May. Now, this one shows you how we would pay for all those things. And we left the intergovernmental revenue, which is mostly shared revenue, but includes a few other aid sources, and charges for services and all other revenue pretty much the same. And we adjusted the property tax. I want to emphasize that $500 million property tax number is a hypothetical. It only comes up once a year when we look at the requests. If we were to fully fund all the requests, we would have to raise property taxes to $500 million. So obviously that was never going to happen. That was not a serious proposal. The property taxes are just over $300 million now. We would not increase them by that much, but we would have had to meet all requests unless one of these other numbers moved. And as the mayor summarized, we have significant new revenue now from shared revenue and from a local sales tax, which will allow us to meet the needs of the requests without such an increase in property taxes. But this is just the math we do every year to show the hypothetical when the requests first come in. And that was the property tax supplemented funds before I split the budget up also into special revenue funds, which are waterworks, sewer, transportation, grant and aid, and delinquent tax. And you can see here the changes from 23 adopted to 24 requests. And the one that moved the most was grant and aid, and that's because of various fluctuations in those numbers. And transportation went down because the transportation fund actually is likely contributing less to the general fund in this year's budget. This will be the last substantive slide, which shows you the difference between what was requested in each department and versus what they had budgeted last year, and we backed the ARPA back into this to make the comparison make the most sense. So you can see here that there were slight increases across all the big departments, and the one that looks like it went up the most, emergency communications, that was a department that was only half funded or partially funded in 23, and it'll be fully funded in 24. That's a new department. They're the 911 operators. That function had always been done. It had been in the police and fire departments, and now it's in independent departments. So that's not really an increase in the number in the actual funded amount, but it reflects that department is now fully funded and independent. So that explains the one number that really jumps off the page as you look at because the mayor did issue instructions to all departments before May to submit cost to continue budgets, which doesn't mean a zero budget without any increase in dollars. It means cost to continue. And because of inflation and because of wage increases, we always expect the cost to continue budgets to have a slight increase. And you see that reflected here in the departments. And that concludes my summary of the details of the budgets and of the requested budgets that came in May. And now we look forward to hearing your questions. Either type them in or raise your hand and Amanda will call on you.
I'd just like to reiterate, we are at this point, we'll open it up for questions and comments. As a reminder, you can participate by typing your questions in the Q&A box or by raising your hand to speak. If you've been called on to speak, I will unmute your microphone. Please remember to then unmute yourself, your own microphone, and then begin by providing your name and address. You'll have 2 minutes to speak with a 30-second warning. So I'm going to call on Jennifer Goldman. Jennifer, you should have the floor. Can you unmute your microphone? I'm going to call on next individual and then we'll come back to Jennifer. Amanda Merquay.
Can you hear me?
Is this Amanda? Yes.
Yes. Good evening. My name is Amanda Merquay. I'm a resident of the 10th Aldermanic District. Address is 142 North 80th Street. First, I'll say that the long-term implications of Act 12 and its attack on local control are devastating. Instead of being able to prioritize Milwaukee residents' basic needs, we're going to be stuck increasing police positions in an already bloated MPD budget. But tonight I'm here to talk about voting rights and request that your 2024 executive budget include increased funding and staff for the Milwaukee Election Commission. In 2023, the executive budget provided less funding for the Election Commission than the agency's request, and I'm asking that you do the opposite this year. It's a remarkable feat for only 9 full-time staff members to support voter registration, maintain the registered voter rolls, process absentee ballots, administer in-person absentee voting, prepare and operate 180 polling sites, coordinate over 1,000 poll workers, and publish timely and accurate election results to the public. Not to mention respond to unexpected changes in election administration brought about by litigation in the lead up to an election. Democracy truly depends on them. By increasing funding and positions for the Election Commission, you could protect the right to vote of some of the most marginalized Milwaukeeans by expanding access to early voting during the 4 scheduled elections in 2024. As you know, in-person absentee voting provides critical access to the ballot box for voters who face significant barriers voting on election day, like voters with unpredictable schedules due to school or hourly wage jobs, disabled voters, voters who are parents and caregivers, and voters needing assistance registering in person.
You have 15 seconds.
Specifically, additional funding and staff could support early voting sites on the UWM and MATC campuses for the spring and fall 2024 elections, providing critical access to young people that can help students get in the habit of voting in every single election, especially when local seats are on the ballot. Let Milwaukee be a model of what voting rights and accessibility look like. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Merquay. We actually were just having conversations about this very topic today and recently, and so we'll be considering many of those things that you just mentioned here. Thank you.
I'm going to go back to Jennifer. Jennifer Goldman, you are unmuted. You have the floor. I'm still not hearing Jennifer. And I'm not seeing any other hands raised.
Amanda, maybe Jennifer could type her question in if she has the capability of doing so.
That is a good idea, Brian. Thank you. Jennifer, you can type in your question in the Q&A box if you're having trouble with the microphone. Any other questions?
Because as of right now, the written question box is empty.
Okay. Okay, Shy McElroy. You have the floor.
Hi, my name is Shy McElroy, and I am the Director of Community Organizing with Coalition on Lead Emergency. And I'm here today because my son was lead poisoned from the time that I brought him home up until the age of 5 with very high lead levels that contribute to his developmental disabilities that he have now today. So fast forwarding to why I got into this work and what we're doing now, the actual level was lowered to 10 micrograms per deciliter from 20 micrograms per deciliter. So that was with the ARPA funding. So my question would be, what is the plan around making sure that when those ARPA fundings run out and that time period has exhausted those 3 years, what is the plan in the budget that's being put behind making sure that the actual actionable level is still paid attention to so that children are not going without the care that they need, all because their lead level is not 20 and above micrograms per deciliter, which is where they're hospitalized, and they're hospitalized even before that. But there's so many children falling under the radar. So what attention is going to be put to a budget to be put in place so that when those ARPA funds are run, when that 3-year ARPA fund course has run its course, there's funding put behind making sure that children are being tested, lead safe and healthy homes programs, and more education and resources for parents who are suffering from this on a day-to-day basis.
30 seconds.
Thank you, Shai, for that question. You probably have seen full well that the city of Milwaukee had a trajectory for replacing lead service lines that was about 70 years. I just announced my State of the City address back in June that working with our partners, particularly at the federal level, President Joe Biden's administration, that our goal is to work to remove every lead service line out of the ground in Milwaukee in the next 20 years, shaving decades off of the initially proposed period for removing lead service lines out of the ground. We've got a commitment to doing this work. And so working with our federal partners and then working, of course, with our health department on the ground, we'll be working to make sure that public safety, not just public safety, but public health rather, is at top of mind in our administration, but particularly, pulling those lead service lines out of the ground at properties all across the city of Milwaukee and doing that in an equitable way. I know that one of the challenges that we've had in years past with doing that is getting access to properties. And I believe that one of the barriers for doing that was a cost associated with doing that. So what I've proposed to the Common Council and my desires to get those lead service lines pulled out of the ground over the course of the next 20 years is to eliminate the cost share. We've seen that works. It's been effective in other communities around the United States that have sought to do that to address this issue. And that's what I'd like to implement here in the city of Milwaukee as well.
Thank you. I'm going to call on Janet Pritchard.
Thank you. And thank you, Mayor Johnson, for convening this hearing around the budget. And my name is Janet Pritchard. I live at 3029 North Downer Avenue in Milwaukee. And I'm also very involved with the Coalition on Lead Emergency. And I want to thank you for the comments you just made about lead service line replacement, and particularly your both the increased ambition that you've articulated around lead service line replacement and the 20-year goal, and also in particular the commitment you just expressed to remove the cost share for removing those lead service lines. And those of us with the Coalition on Lead Emergency look forward to working with you and other members of the Common Council to see those intentions implemented. I also wanted to echo some of the points that were made by Shai around ensuring that there's ways the city can follow up the important investment that the city made of ARPA funds into lead poisoning mitigation with the $28 million that went from ARPA funds to actually help remediate homes where children identified with lead poisoning have been diagnosed. And I think one way to do that would be in the upcoming city budget to provide seed money for a lead safe and healthy homes fund. This would be setting up a fund that would be empowered to raise additional funds through private sources, like philanthropic and other kinds of community resources, community investment funds that banks have to set aside. There are health insurance funds that can be drawn upon. There's resources that, with the right setup and framework, the city could draw upon to actually follow up this ARPA funding and continue the important work of mitigating lead hazards in the city, not only through lead service line replacement, which you've rightly identified as an important need and opportunity in the upcoming years, but also lead paint and lead dust.
Your time is up now.
Thank you.
Thank you. I understand that Jennifer Goldman believes she fixed the microphone issue. Jennifer?
Hello?
Yes.
You can hear me now.
Yes.
Super. Thank you for your patience. Thank you. I had the phone and the calling on at the same time. Okay. Are you ready? Hello?
Yes.
Okay. So, there is amazing plans out there that can boom the economy, boost small businesses, fund and educational activities for all ages and abilities, fill the local theaters with those activities, revenue, and community groups, because I think we should put a community center in each district with you, and then define the uniqueness of each neighborhood, probably with like a flag or whatever, and still, bringing the visitors in, because there's a great plan for bringing visitations in. We need an ARPA plan, and there's about 300 pages of programs and projects, because there's no money spent yet from ARPA dollars to boost the economy, and that was one of the reasons ARPA money was given. And as far as Act 12, it's not that bad. There actually is a section that is an exchange for services. So over the years, I've compiled this skills and bartering and trading system. So like, that guy fixes his roof and he gives his guy soccer lessons instead of money. So we can make a whole barter trading like skill system with that Act 12. Along with Act 12, we can trade personal property. So like we could take all the eviction, merchant property that instead of throwing it in the dump, we could fill those empty warehouses and trade those materials. There's a few things at Act 12. Yeah, we have to, come together, and you got to make the best of it with Act 12. But also this will increase jobs, and the initiatives with community development block grants can be utilized. But the main thing that we all have to do is bring Amy Duman in. She's an amazing woman, and without her, it's just not going to work. And we can't exclude those.
Brian, I see there are some questions in the chat box.
We have two at the moment. The first one is regarding the waterworks. Will the emergency communications team for waterworks be considered for any payroll increases for the intricate roles that we provide in the city of Milwaukee due to us not being considered in the first round of pay raises? If so, who would be in charge of allocating those funds as if they were distributed?
Well, the reclassifications is a process that the department does. The individual department, in this case, Waterworks, would work with the Department of Employee Relations. So Department of Employee Relations would take the lead on that. And as this questioner, I think, implied they knew from the question, has made significant reclassifications. And the mayor alluded to that too in his slides when he talked about considerations for the 24 budget, trying to make sure that salary increases in critical positions would be funded. So we make an effort to fund those raises, salary increases in the departmental budgets where we can. And there's obviously, when they come in after the budget's proposed, there's a bit of a lag there. And that's what we use the wages supplement fund funds as reclassifications temporarily until we can get them confirmed in the departmental budget in the following year.
before we go to the other question that was in the chat box, I just want to acknowledge the question, the comment that was previously mentioned about support for the economy using ARPA, and we have Andrea Fowler, our ARPA director, on board, who's able to speak to that. So, Andrea, I want to have you to address that question.
Thank you, Mayor Johnson.
Just very briefly, I did want to point out that we do have a number of programs that are currently funded from the American Rescue Plan Act that are aimed at boosting the economy and restarting work in businesses that were pretty hard hit by the pandemic. What the council and the mayor have chosen to do so far is to direct those funds to a variety of job training programs and early youth earn and learn programs. So the intention here is to assist the workforce in getting back out there and also assist those industries in which those workers are finding jobs so that both can grow together. Thank you.
Thank you. Excuse me. We have Dr. James Ferguson. You have the floor.
Good evening. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. My name is James Ferguson. My address is 6091 North Teutonia. And thank you guys for hosting this, allowing us to participate in it. And I just wanted to say that based on the diagrams you guys have shown tonight, homeowners are pretty much footing the bill for all of the city's activities. Yet we're feeling increasingly like we have the least amount of influence over how those funds are being spent. And so my question is there any plan to invest in like homeowner or neighborhood watches or associations so that homeowners can feel we're having meaningful involvement in how at least some of our funds are being spent?
Dr. Ferguson, I can tell you that there is some limited funding to assist neighborhood programs in the Neighborhood Improvement Development Corporation, but I would say the primary way for block watches and so forth, I mean, city departments can help by attending those meetings. I know various city departments, including the budget department would come as well, but I know the police are often invited, as is Department of City Development or Department of Neighborhood Services or Department of Public Works if you're looking at ways to change the roads. Department of Neighborhood Services would focus on, what to do with problem properties in your neighborhood, and the police obviously with crime and other issues in the neighborhood. So there's various ways the city departments could work with neighborhood groups, and I think the mayor's office has a team of people. Molly King is on the line, and I know there's other representatives of the mayor's office that could get you in touch with the right departments to help groups of residents and homeowners. So,
Mr. Ferguson, thank you for the question. So, in my office, staff are working on bringing back the citywide Block Watch Council to do exactly what you're talking about, engaging neighbors, particularly engaging homeowners as well throughout the city. That was a program that was around some years ago, but fallen by the wayside. We're working to bring that back, to get some resident voice back to the forefront here.
Thank you. We have James Stein has his hand raised, and then after that, we do have a couple of questions in the question and answer box. Oh, I'm sorry. I believe James might have just either left or lowered his hand. Oh, no, there he is. James?
Hey, I'm right here. I just want to make sure you guys are able to hear me.
Yes.
Hey, Mayor Johnson. I'm speaking tonight as representative of the ACLU of Wisconsin and a concerned citizen of Milwaukee. My address is 3266 South Springfield Avenue. I'm in the Bayview neighborhood, and I'm here to express my support for increased funding for the Milwaukee Election Commission and the establishment of a permanent early voting site on college campuses within our city, specifically MATC downtown and UW Milwaukee. The cornerstone of any thriving democracy of the ability of its citizens to participate in the electoral process with ease and confidence. Our city has made significant strides in promoting civic engagement. However, there are areas where improvements need to be made. Increasing funding for the Milwaukee Election Commission would be an essential step in direction for adequate funding and staffing would allow the commission to have adequate funding and staffing to expand early voting access for the 2024 elections. A permanent early voting site at the UW Milwaukee and downtown MIT campuses is a move that aligns perfectly with our city's commitment for inclusivity and accessibility. College campuses are vibrant hubs of intellectual discourse and diverse perspectives, making them ideal locations to encourage young adults to participate in the electoral process. By setting up permanent early voting sites on these campuses, we would remove potential barriers for young voters, such as transportation, busy schedules, especially for working students, and offering them a convenient and familiar environment to cast their votes. This initiative would foster a culture of civic engagement among our youth in Milwaukee. It sets a precedent for future generations in highlighting the importance of participating in our process by an early age. By investing in these permanent early voting sites, we invest in the city's future and in citizens' active involvement. So I urge the city and you, Mayor Johnson, to consider increasing funding for the Milwaukee Election Commission and explicitly establishing permanent early voting sites on college campuses. Thank you.
James, thank you so much for that comment. I was just having conversations just today, as a matter of fact, with leadership in the Election Commission about opportunities to make sure that we increase voter turnout in Milwaukee, and doing that in a nonpartisan way, but encouraging people all across the city of Milwaukee, no matter where they live, no matter what neighborhood, no matter what zip code, to be able to get up, get out, to go vote, and when they come into contact with city government, to make sure that they are registered to vote and that they do exercise that power. So there is alignment there, and it's something that I want to work on. So you'll be hearing from us on that soon.
Great, thank you. Brian, do you want to read off some of the questions?
Sure. This first one is kind of a two-parter. First, what is being done to support free COVID-19 vaccinations? That's part number one. And then number two, are there any positions within the police department that are specifically focused on prevention?
I can get back to you with the details on the health department. I know that that was a significant amount of money that through the CARES Act and ARPA. I'll have to get back to you on the details of current funding for COVID vaccinations. And within the police department, there is obviously there's investigative divisions, there's planning divisions, but citywide, the crime prevention focus has often been through the Office of Violence Prevention, currently housed in the Milwaukee Health Department, and they work closely with the police department to try to go upstream to prevent violence before it happens.
Director Kovac, if I could just add to that in terms of the
COVID vaccinations. The city did dedicate a significant portion of, as you mentioned, its CARES funding and its ARPA funding to vaccination programs. As the pandemic has changed a bit, those direct responses are not perhaps as necessary for populations who could obtain a vaccination in other ways. So the health department is engaging in a process of considering whether to continue funding vaccinations for individuals who might need some type of access assistance, but those details are not yet finalized.
And the next questions we have, if we can move on, is again about lead. One, who is responsible for ensuring our children are free from lead? And then, is there anything we can do to hold landlords accountable for leads in the home in the first place?
Yeah, that's a great question. I guess I'll start with the second part of the question first, because I know you were looking at particularly like landlords and the like. I was just having a conversation just recently about the ability for the city to have a registry for landlords, property owners who have lead hazards in the home and finding some sort of way to hold them accountable. Now, I believe that some years ago, the city had a program wherein we were able to have inspectors to go in to rental properties. Unfortunately, because state law supersedes local ordinances, that program ended up having to go away. So that's something that we'll have to continue to work with the state to go in, because we know that that children in Milwaukee particularly are lead poisoned by things that they come in contact with in the home or at the home setting, whether it's paint or dust or soil. So that's something that we'll have to continue to work at with our partners over at the state government. I think the first part, if I'm not mistaken, was about just the timeline. Again, initially the timeline that had been set out for removing all lead service laterals. At the time, it was about 70,000 lead service laterals or so. It was 70 years. The announcement that I made at the State of the City address back in June was to expedite that and get those lead service lines out of the ground in 20 years, shaving literally decades off the timeline for removing those potential lead hazards from the ground and into people's homes. And we do that by working collaboratively with partners in the federal government that have said that they want to see every lead service line removed out of the ground, a position that I agree with as mayor of Milwaukee. President Joe Biden has made that a key focus in his White House, and Vice President Harris has been the point person who's been traveling across the country along with Mitch Landrieu, the infrastructure czar at the White House, to make sure that these projects come to fruition all across the United States. And that's something that I'm really excited about working with them to get done for public health in Milwaukee.
Thank you very much. Mitchell Swallow has a question. Mitchell, if you can unmute, you have the floor. Hello.
Climate control crisis, DOT, potholes, broken branches, lead highway, community hub silos, public entertainment premises license, streetcar, neighborhood services, housing crisis. What do all these things have in common? The most amazing individual out there. We really have to support those individuals that can do the most for our city. It's very important. If we don't, it's not showing inclusion and equity. Why take out a small business enterprise office to include it, to replace it with equity inclusion if you're not going to include the most and best individuals in the world? Problems aren't going to be solved. It's going to get worse and worse. And we're all hurt from this. Yeah, it happened. But if we got to do something about it, the world is watching this. We're an amazing city. We are all amazing people. We can do this. We can. These neighborhoods are ready and strong and capable, and so are you guys. All our aldermen. Nick, you're amazing. Stepped in when Dennis came in. You're good stuff. We can do this. All right, and that's Nick, I give you props. That was amazing for you to do. And then Mayor, you got this. We can do this, guys. Come on. All right? We can. There's plans out there all set up and ready to be passed out, and we'll all grow strong together. It'll be all right, and we can do it quick. It'll benefit all the districts, and this will be the most amazing Milwaukee out here, because you all are amazing people. We all are.
Your time is up. Thank you.
Thank you, Mitchell. I think you're amazing too. So thank you so much for chiming in here. So I failed to mention in my previous answer talking about lead and our plans to remove lead service lines from Milwaukee. I'm reminded by Alderman Coggs that we actually have a lead registry as well. So there are a number of landlords that are out there who want to make sure that their properties are lead free. and making sure that potential tenants know that they have properties that are lead free. So there is a registry that's out there. It should be available on the City of Milwaukee's website. If not, we can make sure that we get that information out there to folks who have questions about it. But there is a registry for that here at the city.
Thank you. There are currently no additional hands raised.
We do have one more in the chat box, and this one's pretty direct. Can money allocated for the police be diverted to the Office of Violence Prevention?
Both the police department and the Office of Violence Prevention play critical roles in public safety in Milwaukee. Certainly, the police department is a larger force and has sworn personnel that are protected with different state statutory rights and privileges than other city employees, including those in the Office of Violence Prevention. It's my goal to make sure that both of those offices or both those departments rather, are well funded and carry out their missions across the city of Milwaukee. So we wouldn't be diverting funds from the police department to the Office of Violence Prevention, but working to make sure that OVP has the resources that it needs to accomplish the mission that it has.
Thank you. Devin Anderson has his hand raised. Devin?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hey, I just had a question for the mayor and the budget director. So I know you guys have talked about this 2% sales tax a lot. First question, do we think, or do you know if the 2% sales tax will prevent departmental cuts in the future? Second question, have you run the numbers and figured out how much this 2% sales tax will cost Milwaukee's poorest residents? Obviously, we know sales tax are regressive and have a more disproportionate impact on folks who make less money. So have you run the numbers? And then thirdly, how do you plan on supporting those folks who are going to see hundreds of dollars each year pay this sales tax, help meet their needs?
Thanks for that question, Devin. Both of those we produced a lot of information on during a lot of the town halls after Act 12 passed and before the Common Council voted on implementing the sales tax. And so and the mayor, I think, gave a summary of some of that in his slides when he showed the amounts of money that we're expecting from the sales tax. The short answer to the question, if I could summarize some of the more detailed slides that we showed at those sales tax specific town halls, is that in 24, we're quite confident it's enough money because we still have ARPA. That's the last year we can spend ARPA on departmental operations. And so the combination of still having ARPA and having a new sales tax revenue means 24, we don't have cuts. The mayor did allude in his slides to a possible long and rocky road ahead, I think was the phrase he used, because we've got projections that are based on what the state thinks the sales tax will bring in. We also have projections on what our actuary tells us the pension will likely cost. But both of those numbers, the amount of sales tax we bring in and the amount of pension costs, are dependent on the economy. The sales tax is dependent very much on the local economy, the pension more so on the global economy, because we have a $6 billion fund that's invested globally. But both of those numbers are, if you pencil out the current projections, then yes, there is enough to get through the next several years, and indefinitely, we hope, if you factor in the inflationary increases we expect to get from the sales tax. But those projections get less and less certain the further out you go. So I think we have to plan for a future in which we're not sure whether we'll have more or we'll have less, but we certainly, for the first time in a couple of decades, have the chance of we certainly can do it for 1 year, and we hope for many years, continue with cost to continue budgets. And Act 12 and the sales tax gives us a chance, but as I mentioned, contingent on some factors that we can't predict completely. As for the effect on the poorest residents of the sales tax, I don't have the numbers directly in front of me, but the Department of Administration and the Mayor's office, we did prepare a chart showing roughly the household impact. And obviously, people with less money spend less money, but the question is really about proportions, and given the exemptions for groceries and medicine and diapers and other things, even the proportion is lower for people with less means. But yes, there is an impact on everyone from having a 2% local sales tax, and trying to figure out how to help the local economy and help our poorest residents will be a focus of this and all future budgets, looking through an equity lens at the effects of all city services and city investments, and of course, city taxes and fees as well.
Hey, last question, because I know I didn't use my 2 minutes, is with the 2% sales tax, are you guys thinking about canceling or reducing some of the fees that I know y'all have in the past used as like a stopgap to raise some revenue?
Yeah, I mean, last year fees went up, or this year, 23, fees went up 4%. And we're certainly looking at what the appropriate level should be going forward in consideration of the factors you mentioned. So that's definitely something under active consideration as we look at all of our revenue sources and expenses.
Richard Diaz has his hand raised. Richard, you have the floor if you'd unmute your microphone.
Thank you. Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Thank you. Thanks to Budget Director Kovac and Mayor Johnson for all your hard work and your leadership and really keeping, families that have been impacted by lead poisoning, top of mind, especially over the last few years. But, where we are currently, it reminds me of playing basketball and having the right crossover to get past your defender, and you make it to the basket and you miss the layup or miss the dunk or miss the jump shot if you got an open look. And I feel like that because once ARPA resources dry up, we will have probably the biggest cliff in services of any other department. Having the health department's budget or money for more abatements at lower levels of poisoning is eliminated. So we need a contingency plan, and I think the city is at a really good point now, having built the infrastructure through the partnership with the health department, SDC, Revitalize, plugging in the eco office to combine weatherization and lead abatement, in which we have even greater cost savings when we combine services. But also, the partnership with Employ Milwaukee and Multi-Entrepreneurial Institute to support workforce development and business development. So we would have a really missed opportunity and a crash of our ecosystem if we don't continue to invest. As you know, Mayor Johnson and Budget Director Kovac, the high cost of inaction, makes a lead hazard control a public health and a fiscal imperative. We waste money by not tackling lead cases before they happen. Combining lead service line replacement as a part of a lead poisoning response is another measure. I think also our limited capacity of the health department and waterworks to operate lead programs doesn't exist. So we have the momentum. I think the city taking the lead in this next budget to make a down payment to create a lead safe and healthy home fund will allow us to reap greater benefits and come closer together to get other initiatives done. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard, for your advocacy and for all the people tonight from Cole who've spoken up at this in prior meetings. We're working very closely with the Coalition on Lead Emergency. There was, as everyone who's spoken up on this knows, significant money via ARPA placed to increase the already annual investment we make in addressing the lead health emergency and in responding to homes where we have reason to believe children have tested positive for high levels of blood. We've lowered the threshold, as has been mentioned. That came through, I think, $25 million of investment strictly on the lead, dust, and paint in the home and potentially soil in the backyard, as well as additional $5 million for green improvements in those same houses, energy efficiency improvements, and a job pipeline to make sure that the people providing that work are reflective of the citizens of this city and especially of the most affected neighborhoods by this crisis. So, I mean, I think it was Shai that asked, what's our plan beyond ARPA? And I mean, ARPA will continue, that there is a plan to continue to spend that money and hopefully show good results there. And I think someone else from Cole had alluded to, I think it was Janet Pritchard who said, could we set up a fund? Could we structure a fund to also to continue to get even new kinds of private investment in there? And I think that is one of the strategies we're considering. Obviously, there's ongoing federal grants that have funded the health department's response to lead that are going to continue. There's the ARPA, which will be expiring soon, and so we are going to need a strategy, a long-term, multi-year strategy to maintain and increase our accelerated response to this public health crisis. And certainly, grant money and private health money would be one way to continue that. And we'll be developing that plan in the coming months and years. And we'll be working closely with Cole to make sure we can realize those goals and end this emergency.
Yeah, thank you for that, Budget Director. I would like to just reemphasize the point around, treating lead service line replacement as a lead mitigation effort. It really doesn't make sense that within our current ordinance we don't include a lead poisoning case triggering a private side lead service line replacement, especially if a family is going through the abatement process and contact with the property owner has already been done. Let's just replace their lead service line while we already got all the interested parties there. And then, that would allow us to really prioritize the places where are affected by lead poisoning the most. So thanks again.
Thank you. There are currently no hands raised, though I think we have one question in the chat.
Yeah, we do. And this one goes back to the presentation, actually. Early in the presentation, there was a slide about expenditure reductions and how a lot of those reductions affected employees by making them pay more for their benefits and reducing step increases. Now that the city has more revenue coming in, what's the city going to do that to reverse that for current employees and then to make the city more attractive to find and retain quality public servants?
Well, that's a great question. And look, only people do things. Only people inspect buildings. Only people shovel the snow or plow the snow, collect the leaves, collect the refuse, fight the fires. And so I recognize that, and also recognize the fact that for the past decade, probably decade plus, employees of the city of Milwaukee have not been on the receiving end of increases in their pay, which makes the city a less attractive place to work, to bring folks on, to bring on talent, to do all those things, to provide the services that our residents in the city of Milwaukee depend on, our daily commuters who come into the city every day depend on, that some of the most iconic businesses in the state of Wisconsin that are headquartered right here in the city depend on, and that roughly a quarter of all visitors to the state of Wisconsin who come to Milwaukee depend on as well. And so I when I came into office as mayor, I think that I said in my initial budget presentation that we would include a 2% increase in salaries for our employees, something that you couldn't afford to do, but something that you couldn't afford not to do, simply because we were losing quality, talented employees who provide services. So that is certainly something that is top of mind for me and my administration as we move forward. We need to work to make sure that we retain the staff that we have. Sure enough, we want to bring on more workers to ply their trade and serve the residents and the visitors and the commuters and the businesses in our city. But it's also important that we retain the talent that we presently have too.
Thank you. We still no hands raised. We do have one additional question in the chat box. The question is, with the increased road construction throughout the city, will the administration be investing in red light cameras to reduce speeding, especially in the inner city, or what will be the plan overall?
Thank you for that question. I'm interested in using all the tools that are available to us, to address issues of reckless driving and public safety on the roadways for all users. And so I'm interested in having, technology, including red light cameras and other things, to address that challenge. However, the city of Milwaukee cannot unilaterally go and simply apply red light cameras or other technology fixes. If we could, we would have done that. I would have directed staff to do that. Unfortunately, it requires a state law change in order for us to do that. And we've asked and asked and asked for years and years and years for the state to grant us the authority, the ability to do that. Even doing it on a pilot basis with a limited number of cameras in aldermanic districts, but the state has not moved on that request. So it's something that we'll continue to ask for. I believe that could serve as potentially a force multiplier. So you don't have to have a police officer on every corner enforcing traffic. You could use technology to help you to do that as well. But we find ourselves in the unfortunate position where, again, state statutes are superior to city ordinances. And so we need a statutory change at the state level, state law change, in order for us to be able to implement the use of red light cameras in the city of Milwaukee.
Thank you. As of right now, I have no questions in the question and answer box, and there are also no hands raised.
Great. Well, thank you all so much for joining us here tonight for the preliminary hearing on the city budget. As Director Kovac mentioned, I will present the 2024 City of Milwaukee budget on Tuesday, September 19th, before the Milwaukee Common Council in the Common Council chambers in City Hall. I'm sure that information will be brought to you by a number of media outlets across the city, so you can tune in there. Of course, there's a gallery at City Hall in which you're able to come and join in on the council meeting to see that live as well. Again, I appreciate as mayor having the opportunity to engage with residents all across the city of Milwaukee, including in settings like this. So thank you all so much, and we'll see you again on September 19th.